In the city of Liverpool, we have only two remaining public lockups or prison cells, one in Wavertree area and another in Everton area. Although both have been out of use for many decades, they are iconic ancient structures. However, we go past them every day, not realizing just how important they are to the city. Nestled away by itself on a piece of open ground by the roadside, a stone throw from the famous Picton clock, is the Wavertree Lock-up. It's surrounded by trees and enclosed by three roads: Chilwell Road, Mill Lane and Lake Road. This tiny sandstone building may seem just like another quirky building, but it's in fact a former prison and a Grade II listed 18th century building built nearly 230 years ago. The Wavertree Lock-up was built in 1796 to keep drunks and other prisoners overnight. Drunkenness was a big problem even 2 centuries ago. Back then, Wavertree was a freestanding village and not part of Liverpool. It's one of the oldest recorded places in whole of England. This part of Wavertree was an important junction for many people wanting to go to other parts such as West Derby or Gattaca. It was becoming a party place. People from growing town of Liverpool were coming out here. Until 1796, the village constable was responsible for the parish and would round up petty criminals and keep them overnight at his own house. Don't think his wife would have been too happy with that. Just imagine taking random strangers back to your own home and locking them up. Most of these offenders were just drunks. When they became sober the next day, he'd release them or take them before the local magistrate. The resulting punishment would have been something similar to community service, or something as fatal as death sentence, depending on the crime. But the post of constable was an unpaid one. The villagers took it in turns, a year at a time. But the constable could claim expenses of 2 shillings a night. This is equivalent to 10p today, but back then it was a lot of money. So in 1796, the villagers and the local board decided it was cheaper for them in the long run to pay for and build a purpose-built lockup instead, as the lockup would be under jurisdiction of the county magistrates. The concept of lockup was not new. They dated back to around 1560s and were often built as part of a complex including village pound, stocks and pillory. But the idea of a lockup in Wavertree was objected by a Mr. John Myers, the wealthy owner of Lake House, where Monkswell Drive is today. He felt the scheme showed a desire to annoy him and would spoil his view. But his complaint was overruled by other villagers, and a Mr. Hind was engaged to prepare plans and get the work started. For the location, they chose this triangular piece of green land which was the heart of the old village. It's the only surviving piece of registered common land in Liverpool today. This green is the last surviving part of the much larger Wavertree Green, which was divided up into fields or enclosed by Act of Parliament in 1768. Until this Enclosure Act came along, the area from Picton Clock to Queen's Drive was a large piece of open and fenced wasteland and had a windmill surrounded by 2 quarries. The windmill was around where Torview Road of Wilson Road is today. The Enclosure Act divided the land into fields so it could become more productive. Lock-up is probably made from the stone from these quarries. Behind the triangular common land there used to be a lake, hence why the road is called Lake Road. But in 1928, almost 100 years ago, the council decided to fill the lake and we now have a playground here instead. The Lock-up is a small sandstone Georgian building made with yellow sandstone sourced locally and containing one cell. The base of the Lock-up is roughly 5.5 meters by 4.5 meters and is approximately 8 meter high. But these are my measurements, which I made quickly using a tape measure, so be careful of spreading them as concrete facts. And even though it's octagonal in shape, people still called it roundhouse. The original design had 2 stories and an almost flat roof, and had stairs leading to top floor. It's deceptively big inside. The bottom cell would have been around 2.5 meters high and dark. It has a number of square blind windows, and the one above the entrance has a smaller upper part open with iron bars. Some prisoners would escape from it using the help of their friends, who would hide behind the parapet and knock a hole in the roof after nightfall. A small stove was installed to keep the prisoners warm, and they were supplied with food and water. However, it is said that the open fireplace, located on the right side of the entrance door, was never used. The chimney to the fireplace is the only provision for ventilation, but other than that, there were few home comforts. The door does not fit well, and the guard bed was later broken and left with only loose straws for bedding. There was no toilet either. Once the door got locked, it would have been a frightening place. Dark, cold, and damp. Definitely not a place you want to spend another day in. The trees around the lockup were later added on the common land, and it once had iron railing fence also. So the lockup was a local jail until a police station was built. In 1845, the first police station opened in the village on High Street, so the lockup became almost redundant after nearly 50 years. It was sometimes used to isolate cholera victims from the rest of the community. They stayed here overnight and were taken away the following day or pronounced dead. There are records in 1840s of Irish immigrants temporarily staying here while trekking out from Liverpool into the surrounding countryside during the famine years. These families were destitute. They literally had nowhere to stay, so were put up in here and made their way next day. Later, the lockup was used to store the village fire hose. In 1868, the lock-up owners, the Wavertree Local Board of Health, thought about demolishing it. Thankfully, the chairman of the board was the architect and local historian Sir James Allinson Picton. He was famous in Liverpool due to his connection with libraries. He was a member of the Liverpool Town Council and its chairman for nearly 40 years. Picton lived nearby, around 100 metres away in a house on top of Mill Lane. It's known as Sandy Knowe and he designed it himself. Sir James Picton came up with the idea of rescuing the lock-up and drew up plans for its repair and beautification. He recommended adding a new pointed or pyramid-shaped slate roof and the weather vane, just like we see today. Sadly, at the time of recording this video, the weather vane was broken. Picton's plans were implemented the following year in 1869. Interestingly, the Picton clock, dedicated to his wife Sarah Pooley, was added some 15 years later in 1884, followed few decades later by the Abbey Cinema. Another of Liverpool's famous son, George Harrison of the Beatles, was born a stone's throw away from the Wavertree Lock-up in 12 Arnold Grove, so the Beatles would have walked around here regularly. In 1952, the Lock-up became a Grade II listed building. In 1979, the Wavertree village was designated as a conservation area. For many years, the Lock-up was used by Liverpool City Council's Parks and Gardens Department to store tools and grass-cutting equipment. Today, the Lock-up is empty and disused, and the upper floor, stair and fireplace are no longer there. It only serves as a picturesque reminder of the Wavertree of nearly 200 years ago and is a visual reminder of the architecture from the Georgian period. A green plaque was added by Wavertree Society, which was founded in 1977 by Mike Chitty and other members.
I went to Chilwell School back in 1991, and back then this was the Olive Mound wing of the Chilwell School.
For the first 2 years we'd study here, and then after that we'd move to the Holt wing near Chilwell Five Ways, where the Chilwell School is now today. So I'd walk past the Wavertree Lock-up on a daily basis, and then I'd always think to myself, I wonder what it was. Back then, internet was new and the mobile was just coming out, so it wasn't a simple thing as quickly Googling it. Those days that didn't exist. But I was always curious as to what it was.
Who would have thought that 33 years later, I'll be making a documentary on this place, educating you guys. It's crazy, isn't it, how much history we pass by on a day-to-day basis?
But the story doesn't end there. One of my teachers was Mr. Ball. Now, Mr. Ball was quite a celebrity in our school because he was the main researcher for the BBC Question of Sports. So he mingled with every sports personalities and knew them really well. But take a guess as to who is Mr. Ball's brother-in-law. Mike Chitty. Mr. Ball's wife's sister is married to Mike. How mad is that?
Now, Mr. Ball is also the reason why I became a Liverpool Football Club fan. Back in 1992, one of my friends grasped on me that I quite like Man United. I thought they played well. I didn't support them. And then he took me to the front of the class, Mr. Ball, and then gave me a full lecture on the history of Liverpool Football Club and why they're far superior to Man United. I died of shame and I blacked out, and then I promised myself that from that day onward I was going to support nobody else other than Liverpool. But yeah, that's the true story. Thankfully Mr. Ball is still alive and doing well and in good health, alhamdulillah, and we do stay in touch on a regular basis. But sadly, Mike Chitty had passed away in June 2023 after a short illness, and unfortunately I didn't have the privilege of meeting him. But what I want to say is a couple of things. First and foremost, condolences to his family and his friends and all his loved ones. I hope you guys are doing well. And secondly, I've learned a lot from watching Mike's videos and reading his online articles, and I know he's also published a book. So I've learned a lot about Wavertree, and even a lot of the information within this documentary, as well as the Picton clock and Sir James Picton's documentary, is based upon the findings of Mike. So this documentary is my small tribute to Mike for the wonderful, amazing legacy that he's left behind. And even though I've not met him, his reach is far beyond beyond his passing. So yeah, may God give him peace, and may his soul rest in peace. And I hope everyone watching, especially you, Mr. Ball, I hope you like this video as well.
Every year in September, the Wavertree Society opens the lock-up to public as part of the annual National Heritage Open Day. You can go inside for free and let your mind wander what it would have been like to stay in it overnight all those years ago. The Wavertree Society sells memorabilia featuring rare photos and even have mini models of the lock-up. They also tell you the history of the place. The members, mostly elderly, take pride in their work and work very hard to make sure you're left with a good impression of the place. Support them if you can.
So this is my first time coming here and the Open Heritage Day. So every September, on the 15th of September, the Wavertree Society open up the lock-up for everyone to see. It's pouring down. I'm not going to speak for too long. Trying to look cool, but I'm actually really wet. But yeah, they do a great job. So come along. Every September, like I said, they open it and it's free to go in. They do sell a lot of products in here as well, and they do an exceptional job. So come and have a look.
A week after the National Heritage Open Day was World Car Free Day on 22nd of September 2024. For a few hours, the high street on Wavertree was closed for cars and small stalls were set up to the delight of the locals, including me.
Well, I've never seen the high street ever like this. It's pouring down. I'm gonna put this back on. It's pouring down and everyone's out. Have you ever seen a site like this? Never, since I've been in Liverpool for the last God knows how many decades. It's an incredible site. Come along. It's on till 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's a unique site, so definitely come along.
Built 9 years before the Wavertree Lock-up is the Everton Lock-up. It's located in the heart of Old Everton Village Green, on a slope where Netherfield Road and Everton Brow meets Shaw Street. It's a piece of history that's linked to both the local community and sports. Made in 1787, next to an ancient footpath over the Brow, Everton Lock-up served as a nighttime detention place for drunkards and local criminals. It remains the oldest structure in Everton area and a lovely example of 18th century Georgian architecture. Everton Lock-up is rounded, whereas Wavertree Lock-up is octagonal. It only has one ground floor, so it's smaller than Wavertree Lock-up also. In fact, it's nearly half the size height-wise. The whole lock-up is approximately 3.8 meters squared wide and 4.5 meter high. But once again, these are my measurements and not fully accurate. The building is made out of red sandstone in a form of a round drum with conical roof. There are no windows, so the 2 meter tall cell is dark and damp inside. When it's wet weather, the land is a marsh. The elevated position overlooks the Liverpool city centre and the River Mersey. This would have been even more spectacular sight back in the 18th century, as there was no high-rise building or tall trees obstructing your views. It was a beautiful village with cottages and mansions and only meadows separating the township of Everton from the town of Liverpool below. Not surprisingly, the spectacular view with its clean air and extensive view of the river made it a popular tourist spot for day trippers even 250 years ago. Some folklore suggested that there is a tunnel under the lock-up's floor which runs towards the River Mersey. However, that's not true. It has a solid foundation. Just ask the prisoners. In the History of Everton book written by Robert Sayers in 1830, he mentioned that the tower was actually an idea by the people of nearby Kirkdale and not the Evertonians. The Kirkdale people wanted the tower to be built in the township of Everton to catch the rogues and vagabonds, and the Evertonians allowed it. Robert called the lock-up the stone jug, bridewell, and watchbox, and he hated the lock-up with a passion. He questioned why the Kirkdalites have thrust this unnecessary evil into Everton's bosom and why the Evertonians permitted to remain in their territory. He wanted this apology for a bridewell ought to be taken down. It's a discredit to the community, and it should be built in the jurisdiction of Kirkdale instead. Roberts said the wealthy settlers and landowners of Everton deserved a handsome and spacious suite of buildings which should comprise a set of offices for the High Constable and tax collector. And I thought I was opinionated. The Everton Lock-up is also referred to Prince Rupert's Tower or Prince Rupert's Castle. Prince Rupert of the Rhine, the grandson of James I and nephew of Charles I, and his army used this Everton area as a campsite during the English Civil War as part of the Siege of Liverpool battle, where they attacked the Liverpool Castle, once located where Liverpool One shopping centre is today. He had a stone cottage near Everton Brow which he used as his headquarters. But both Prince Rupert's Tower and Prince Rupert's Castle names are incorrect. Rupert came here in 1644, over 140 years before the lock-up was built. After the Civil War ended, Rupert's cottage became an ordinary house once more, and for many years it was used as a family home before being demolished in 1845, nearly 180 years ago. Sadly, the cottage became a target for souvenir hunters over the years as they pulled chunks of stone from its walls. But Prince Rupert's name would be forever written in Everton's history. Rupert Lane, Rupert Grove, and Rupert Shore are all named in his honour. However, the lock-up has nothing to do with him. But hey, why let the truth get in the way of a good story?
Some people still call it the Princess Rupert Tower or Princess Rupert Castle, even today. Possibly the same people who claim to have seen the Loch Ness Monster.
From footballing perspective, the Everton Lock-up is super important. The stone jug features on the official badge of Everton Football Club. Village Street was the location of the Queen's Head pub, where in November 1879, St. Domingo Church football team were renamed to Everton after the district of Everton. Many of the early football players came here from this area. In 1938, just before the Second World War, the club secretary Theo Kelly was asked to design a crest for the club. He didn't know what to include and was puzzling over it for 4 months. Suddenly he had an idea. Why not include a reproduction of the beacon which stands in the heart of Everton? So he included the lock-up as part of the design sketch and came up with the club's motto also, Nil satis nisi optimum, only the best is good enough. But Theo wasn't an artist. When he did the drawing, he made the tower slightly longer and skinnier. When in 2013, the club made the tower chubbier so it's more reflective of its actual size, the fans didn't like it, and they went back to Theo's original distorted version. Interestingly, even though the lock-up first featured as part of the club's crest in 1938, it wasn't used again for another 40 years and was reintroduced to the crest from 1978 onwards. During those 40 years, they used different versions of the letters EFC, the abbreviation for Everton Football Club. Ironically, the club never played in Everton. The main early stadium was Anfield, where Liverpool Football Club famously play today. Then they moved to Goodison Park Stadium in Walton in 1892. In 1997, Everton Football Club donated £15,000 to repair the building. Most of you football fans will know Everton Football Club is nicknamed the Toffees, but you probably don't know where that comes from. In 1753, a young girl called Molly Bushell opened her first toffee shop in a cottage up the hill where she perfected the art of Everton toffee. Molly had received the recipe from a local doctor who claimed it had medicinal properties. Over the years, her toffee became world famous and Everton Football Club got the nickname the Toffees. Molly's second shop was literally on the other side of the path from the lock-up, which was sadly demolished due to vandalism.
So this spot is the heart of Everton in many ways. Everton Football Club are good, but we Liverpool Football Club are better.
Everton's new football stadium is at Bramley Moor Dock, next to the River Mersey, and you can see both stadiums from the Everton Lock-up, so you get the physical, visual connection between all the Everton landmarks. Everton Lock-up is Grade 2 listed building. The Lock-up is part of the public park in Everton. Abdullah Quilliam Masjid, the first mosque in Britain, is a short walk away. The Lock-up's association with football is so important. 10 years ago, in 2014, the building was permanently illuminated in royal blue of Everton Football Club. Back then, the township of Everton had wealthy residents and landowners. The spectacular view of the town below and its coastline, the opportunity to visit the famous toffee shop, as well as the cottage used by Prince Rupert during the English Civil War, made it a very popular tourist spot. It was a very posh area, unlike today. Sadly, Everton and nearby areas are rough areas nowadays, especially in the evening. So be a little bit careful if you're thinking of visiting the place. But majority of the locals are nice and friendly and things are improving slowly. Both lockups are currently owned by Liverpool City Council and are historical Liverpool landmarks. They are very important to the history of Wavertree and Everton respectively, and Liverpool in general. They are part of the city's cultural heritage, telling the story of a community and linking their values to the local culture. Wavertree Lock-up and Everton Lock-up stand as a curious reminder of the Wavertree and the Everton of 2 centuries ago. Remember that the next time you drive by or walk past it.